Support for Central Florida Public Media comes from the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University Worldwide Campus, providing students from all 50 states and 119 countries with innovative education and opportunities for success. More at erau.edu/ww.
I'm Sharon Stone. This is Engage. UCF is the largest university in Florida. It's a major employer here with thousands of workers, and it is a research institution. For years, Florida lawmakers have used a program called preeminence to elevate and reward the state's highest performing public universities. To qualify, universities have to meet a series of benchmarks in graduation rates, research performance, endowment size, and other performance measures prioritized by the state. Last year, UCF was not among the 4 schools that earned that preeminent designation. The University of Florida, Florida State, the University of South Florida, and Florida International split the $40 million allocated in the budget. It was a $100 million allocation the year before. Then UCF announced last September that for the first time, it met the metrics to achieve preeminence status.
When we launched our Unleashing Potential strategic plan, we set bold goals. Among them, to reach the state designation of preeminent research university. I am thrilled to share that we have achieved the 12 outcomes required for that designation. These are not just numbers. They are lives changed, opportunities created, and futures shaped.
That strategic plan UCF President Alexander Cartwright referred to launched in 2022. The university spent years and resources working to become a preeminent university. Then the Florida legislature got rid of preeminent funding this year. All of it. Robert Casanello is an associate professor of history at UCF and the statewide United Faculty of Florida Union president. He talks about the impact of budget cuts on potential layoffs and university programs.
I can only extrapolate from what we've been told here as faculty. And what appears to have happened is that a number of years ago, roughly about 3 years ago, our provost at the time sort of made a gamble, made a bet, and he believed that money would be flowing 3 years in the future, which is where we are today, and decided to sort of invest the extra money that was coming into UCF at the time and in other places to chase these metrics that state lawmakers had for universities known as performance funding metrics.
When you're talking about the metrics, are you referring specifically to the preeminence program?
Yes, the preeminence, right. And what happened is that while UCF chased those metrics and achieved those metrics, 3 years down the road, the state lawmakers decided to no longer fund the achievement of those metrics. And so I think the floor kind of dropped out of this plan. So they're trying to pay for the spending they wanted to do this year by cannibalizing the budgets of the various colleges and programs at UCF.
You used the word cannibalized. Can you speak more to what has actually been cut at UCF?
What I have heard through multiple sources is that UCF is trying to, shore up a $15 million hole in the budget that they have. And what they are doing is they're going to the individual colleges and saying, you have to tighten your belt. And the way it kind of impacts a program is that then they are kind of confronting, okay, how are we going to cut? And, I'll just be honest, if I were, a faculty member, and I am a faculty member, I would be concerned that the solution might be layoffs or terminations because, in a lot of colleges, the biggest pot of money is salary.
How will you know if the plans have to be implemented? Where does that come from?
That's a great question. I mean, those are probably reported to and discussed at the higher levels of administration. I mean, I know in my college, our dean came to us because our department's been impacted by these cuts, and he had a plan. And he talked to us about the plan, which involves a reorganization of the department I'm in, is history department, and we're going to move into a new school that will include philosophy and women and gender studies as one unit. So we're going to go from 3 units to 1 unit, and that's a sort of cost-saving measure, as I understand it, because you reduce staff cost and a little bit of what it takes to run the programs without necessarily cutting faculty. But I know, like in our department, I mean, we've had quite a few people who have left and are no longer here who are not being replaced. So we actually have a bit of a cushion, if you will.
Are you seeing any real world impacts in the classroom? Are you teaching more classes, larger classes?
Some of the proposals we are hearing, like in my department, and I'm hearing from people in other departments, is to teach more students. So that clearly is, a workforce response, because if we're teaching, more students per class, that's less people needed to teach. So I think that probably one of the results, there'll be less adjuncts employed because those students will be spread out more through the current full-time teaching faculty.
Are students being encouraged to transfer into other majors that are more aligned with the university's priorities?
I think throughout Florida that is happening. I've heard it happening here. I've not witnessed it because I don't sit in the offices of advisors to hear what they tell students, but it is our understanding that the university and students are being encouraged to go into, what you might call career-ready majors. So they're like being things like engineering, the hard sciences, business, and those programs are sort of being incentivized in this climate, and the humanities and social sciences are sort of being ignored, if you will, or at least not being as high profile. And I mentioned earlier our provost who was chasing the performance criteria, and according to the performance criteria was to boost our engineering colleges and boost engineering majors, boost the amount of money going into engineering.
So UCF educates more students than any other university in Florida. What do you think the public needs to better understand about what is happening right now with the financial picture at UCF?
One of the biggest problems I see in all this is that the university seems to be reactive. And the university launched, this was, I think, I want to say 2 years ago, maybe more, launched this thing, oh, we're going to be the space university, we're going to be the tech university. It's like, well, that was a response to the performance funding, because the performance funding was incentivizing those things. So that's us responding to that. And I would challenge UCF administrators to say, when are you going to create your own path and create your own vision and not be responding to others?
Robert Casanello is an associate professor of history at UCF and statewide United Faculty of Florida Union president. We reached out to UCF last week for a response to those faculty-raised concerns about the impact of a $15 million budget shortfall and to changes to preeminence funding. We also asked if any majors or departments are being eliminated or consolidated due to budget challenges, and whether budget reductions are expected to result in layoffs or hiring freezes. UCF acknowledged our request, but as of our deadline this afternoon, we had not received a response. UCF is asking state lawmakers for $35 million in the 2027-28 budget to support its preeminent university status. The lack of preeminence funding isn't the only thing causing UCF trouble. It's a major research university, and much of that research depends on federal funding, and UCF has lost millions of dollars. At the beginning of 2025, executive orders from the White House paused federal funding while agencies reviewed programs and their alignment with administration priorities. In June of last year, the university said 28 federal awards were terminated, representing about $21 million in funding that disrupted researchers and staff. Talet Rahman is a professor of physics at UCF. She says the loss of federal funding is affecting faculty and research, and she is concerned about what could come next.
I think we have been lucky in the sense that we haven't had some of the very major grants cut, but yes, there's still been cuts of millions of dollars. So personally, I'm okay. I have funding from NSF and DOE, and it is National Science Foundation, and DOE is Department of Energy. So I have been lucky so far. But then, we are all being very cautious, but because we never know when our funding will be cut. What is being proposed right now by the White House is that after the scientific evaluation has been done, there will be a political appointee who's going to decide whether the topic of the proposal is in line with the presidential priorities or not. But the reason we're all very nervous about it is that even if I tell you that my funding is okay right now, I'm not sure whether it will be okay a few months from now. It is not even sure anymore that if you've been granted funding, whether you will be able to keep it. Funds have been to various universities. They have retracted them after they were given. And the Office of Research has, I guess, done as well as it could to make sure that these programs, not all of these programs collapse, but there's no question that there is a big negative impact on the science that is being done at UCF and at other universities.
What does federal research money actually pay for at UCF?
First of all, it pays for personnel. It pays for students. We pay graduate research assistants. So, when you're doing a PhD in disciplines where funding is possible to get, then a good number of graduate students in the department will be funded on research grants. So supposing that these research grants dry out, then in our department, for example, right now we have about 100 students, and about 50 of them roughly are paid from grants. So basically what you'll be looking at is reducing the number of graduate students by a factor of 2. Okay, so that means that our ability to produce PhDs will be reduced by 50% and so on. Then basically what you're essentially saying is that we will be reducing the workforce, the future workforce, by a factor of 2. Okay, so that's pretty significant. So that's just one part of it. But then these dollars also pay for equipment. They also pay for postdoctoral scholars, and they also pay for undergraduates. So overall, you can see that, one aspect was just graduate students, but then there are all these other aspects, which is what you need to keep research going. Research builds on what has been done for decades. What we are doing right now, we're reaping benefits of research that was paid for by federal agencies, say 50 years ago. So, and built up on that. So if this trend continues, then we will be left behind.
Any concerns about layoffs?
Well, yes, tremendously. So let me just give you an example. UCF decided in December to close its Florida Solar Energy Center. And FSEC is what it was called. It has 66 people there. Most of them were researchers, top-notch researchers, and 60 of them were fired. This included staff as well. Okay, so the number includes researchers and staff. And basically that operation, which was about, I would say, roughly $12 million project there, that is basically now down to almost zero. And Florida Solar Energy Center was one of the centers which was actually, as the name implies, they were very much working on renewable energies, clean energy. It was a research center, so they had a good facilities there. They were very competitive. And because it was into renewable energies, and there were all kinds of contracts on solar, on fuel cells, and so on, and that is totally gone. And this is after being here for about 5 decades. FSEC was one of the outstanding research centers that UCF was supporting.
So going back to your work in research and university being a research institution, What do you think the impact to students could be? Do you think that fewer could be accepted into certain majors or some get eliminated?
So here is how one can take a look at it. Because of the work in all these different areas and because of the kind of hiring that they have done and so on, we have achieved what is called Research 1 status, R1 status. R1 means a research intensive university. If a student is coming to a Research 1 university, what they're expecting is that they would be able to then go from here into careers that may be research intensive. And if that funding is gone, then, and if that, the whole infrastructure that supports that kind of research intensive environment is not there, then of course students will suffer. This is happening all over the country. I think I have to come back to the point that in the end, we are competing with people in the rest of the world, not even just in Florida or just in the US. We are competing with people around the world. And around the world, students are able to go get into research intensive universities, and that is what leads to careers in research, careers into technology, careers into high-level professions. And if we are going to be losing out our competitive edge in that, then that is going to be affecting the students and the future of the country.
What do you think the Central Florida community needs to understand about what's happening now at UCF?
Central Florida community needs to understand that public education is under attack. And so what the community has to realize is that entities like University of Central Florida and other public universities have to be supported and have to be maintained so that they continue to provide low-cost, high-quality education to all Floridians. And so I think the message should be that very clear that this is something that has to be taken care of right now. We can't afford another 2 years of it, let alone more than that.
Talet Rahman is a professor of physics at UCF. The university has spent years building itself into one of the state's major research universities. Now it's facing the challenge of sustaining that investment through state and federal funding changes. Engage is a production of Central Florida Public Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Richard Copeland is our senior producer. I'm Sharon Stone. You can reach us anytime with questions, comments, or story ideas. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Thanks for listening.